Hello, my name is Brendan. I work for the Central Park Conservancy, and welcome to Central Park. I want to say first off that there is a thunderstorm rolling overhead. If my internet goes out, blame the weather. I'll be right back. Just stick around. And if I don't ever come back, we'll make sure that you get the recording of this video. But I have faith as long as you have faith. The Central Park Conservancy is the nonprofit who takes care of Central Park year-round. And because getting to Central Park is not an option for so many, we at the Conservancy wanted to bring the park to you. Join us every Wednesday at 12:30 for a virtual lunchtime stroll. Since the 4th of July is coming up here in the United States, I thought it would be fun to explore Central Park's military history. So today we're going to be traversing the fort landscape. We'll be together for about 15 minutes or so. All the photos that you're going to see were taken in the last week by me. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. You can feel free to use the chat feature. If you've been in a weekly walk before, this is not new to you. The chat feature, you can use it to say hello and comment. If you have a question, try using the Q&A feature. I've got two colleagues, and that would be Juan and Ian today, and they're on the back end. They're going to be answering questions as we go. And you'll also be invited to participate in some polls, and I'll launch the first one in just a moment. And then I will read the results once everyone has had a chance to vote. All those you can find in your Zoom control bar. Okay. Before I show you the route that we're going to walk, I wanted to give you a sense of exactly where the fort landscape is and what we mean when we say fort landscape. This is a map of the northern end of Central Park, and the fort landscape is the 6-acre area that's just south of the Harlem Meer, and that's circled right there. Now that you know where it is, let's see how many of you have been. I'm going to pull up a poll. Awesome. So I'd love to know if you have never been to the fort landscape, or if you have been but didn't even know you were there, or if you knew you were there and have been as well. So many people walk through this area and they take in the sights, they see the rocks and the trees, but they don't actually know all the history behind it. And that's what we'll explore today. All right. So here is the fort landscape. Oh no. It says I've been signed out because my account has been signed on from another device. I'm going to click OK and hopefully I don't go away. No. But I don't think I went away. All that went away is my screen. Okay, share this. All right, I'm gonna check the chat to make sure. Am I still here? Okay, beautiful. Whew, scary, y'all. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. This is already a day. This is the fort landscape today. This is actually looking across at the fort landscape, and this is from the Dana Discovery Center Plaza, and you can actually see the outcroppings of Manhattan mica schist, the bedrock of Manhattan at the base of the hill. Let's see how many of us have been to the fort landscape. It looks like we have about 230 folks on the program right now. Many people have never been, which is exciting. I'm so happy to take you there today. And a lot of people have actually been, but didn't know that they were there. And then a few of us, looks like 32, they had a plan when they went in. That's very exciting. We love introducing new places of Central Park to people. Now I need you to use your imagination for this next part. Looking at this landscape, I want you to remove most of the trees and all the tall buildings that are in the back. I want you to drain the mere and then replace it with kind of a swamp. And then I want you to add a cobblestone road that comes down from the hills. And then I want you to add some forts. All right, there it is, the fort landscape. Now, we don't have the time to go into the entirety of Central Park's military history, but we do need a little bit of info if we're going to truly appreciate the landscape that we're about to explore. So I'm going to leave out a ton of information, and if you are a historian or a social studies teacher, I'm sorry in advance. Now, during the Revolutionary War in the late 1700s, the British occupied New York. Because of the hilly nature of northern Manhattan, they created a series of fortifications to protect against the possibility of an attack from the north. Oh, you probably heard that one. And to ensure control of the river. Now, during the War of 1812, the Americans created forts on that exact same landscape, and they connected their forts with a low earthen wall, and they peopled those forts with about 1,600 soldiers. And so what you're looking at in this painting from the New York Historical Society is on the left, Fort Clinton. In the middle, that little building is a gatehouse. On the far right, it's called Nutter's Battery. And then between the gatehouse and Nutter's Battery is another fort called Fort Fish. Aside from the fact that these forts allowed for really strategic views of the northern part of Manhattan, there was one very important reason that they were here, and it's actually that little road that goes underneath that gatehouse. All right, there's a lot happening here, but bear with me. The whole area is called Mcgowan's Pass. I want you to look at the underlying drawing. You can see blue on the right side. That's the Harlem Creek. It's not there anymore. And a small bridge that crosses it on the top right. And you're also going to see a road that goes right through the middle and then splits into a Y. It's right there. Okay. That's the Kingsbridge Road. It's an incredibly important thoroughfare during early New York's history. And at that Y, it actually splits into the Boston Post Road, which goes to Boston, and the Albany Post Road, which goes to Albany. And of course, if you have roads that go to Boston and Albany and New York, and there's a very specific intersection, that's the intersection that you want to control. Clearly, the Meer didn't exist yet, and you can see the red dots. That's the outline of the Meer today. Now, when Olmsted and Box created Central Park, they recognized the value of some of these spaces. So this is an image from the 1870s. It's a drawing. And although the scenic maps show elements of the forts, they were mostly eroded by the time that Olmsted and Box got there to design this area of the park. But they again recognized the value of those sweeping views. And so they actually included some of those forts as scenic overlooks. Okay, and the last thing, I just put up a little circle. Inside of that circle is a little brown box. That is blockhouse number 1. It's also a huge part of Central Park's military history. It was a munitions depot built during the War of 1812. It's the oldest building standing in Central Park. We're not going to go there today. But as Ian said at the end of our last weekly walk on the North Woods, there's so much in the North Woods to explore that I'm sure we'll explore it in a future weekly walk. Okay, we did it. Thanks for bearing with me. Here's where we're actually going to go today. We're going to start at East 106th Street. We're going to meander through the fort landscape, and we're going to end just south of the conservatory garden. We're going to visit each of the forts that I just shared with you, but this is not going to be all military history. There's so much to see right here in the here and now. It's a long walk. It's very hilly, so pace yourselves. Okay. As we know, the fort landscape, it sits high atop hills, and you can actually see Fort Clinton, which will be our first kind of main fort stop. It's on the top right, it has a flagpole. The path to the immediate right, that would take us to the shoreline of the Meer, but we're gonna head up the steep slope to the left. The top of the hill, we're gonna veer toward the right, and we're gonna go toward Fort Clinton. It's named after DeWitt Clinton, who was the mayor of New York during the War of 1812. And to get to the fort, we need to go up a few stairs. And here we are. Fort Clinton. And what's a fort without a cannon? There's also a mortar on the other side of that cannon. A mortar looks like a stubby cannon. It's right there. You can see I took the picture from the other side. Neither this cannon nor this mortar was here at any time during the fort's history. They actually belong to a British warship that sunk in the East River in about 1780 during the Revolutionary War. The cannon and the mortar were donated anonymously to Central Park in 1865, and then they spent a lot of time in storage. Here's a great story about that cannon. Turns out it was loaded the whole time. It had a cannonball and gunpowder in it. In 2013, we were doing a routine cleaning. We took out the plug in the front and we noticed the ball. So we called 911 and the bomb squad came. And when they tipped the cannon over, a cannonball about the size of a melon rolled out, and it had a little pack of gunpowder that was wrapped in wool in the back of it. It's safe now, I promise. although this cannon is really cool, people come here not really for the cannon so much as to see the views. Now, the Conservancy rebuilt Fort Clinton as part of a larger restoration in 2014. And to do that, we recreated some of the historic details, but we also installed new pavings and new plantings and new furnishings. And the goal was really not to bring back the forts, but to better showcase the panoramic views of the Harlem Meer and beyond, like Olmsted and Vaux had originally intended. So you can see that we made it to Fort Clinton. We're gonna move on to another of the fortifications, and this one's called Nutter's Battery. Before we move on, here's a seemingly random question that actually ties into this program very well. Of all of Central Park's animal inhabitants, which is the most fortified? A turtle. Could be a dad joke, could be a bad joke. The jury's still out. This is a red-eared slider, and he was actually walking across the path as I rounded the bend. And you can tell he's a red-eared slider, which is one of the most common turtles that we have in Central Park. Just behind his eyes, there's a little red mark. I was a bit surprised actually to find a turtle up so high because it's really, really rocky. But then as I watched him move, he was really booking it. Here he goes. Apparently, he also likes morning hikes. And one last picture of the turtle. I just love this because he's walking on the right side of the path like a true New Yorker. Okay, back to the fort landscape. On our way to Nutter's Battery, we passed by an area in Mcgowan's Pass where the gatehouse that I pointed out once stood, and it looked like this. As part of the restoration of the landscape, in the summer of 2013, we hired an archaeological firm to do research and some digs. Now, before we do any restorations, be it on a building or on a landscape, we do a ton of research because we want to ensure the preservation of the landscape, but also historical accuracy. And they found some really cool stuff. You can see it pictured here. They uncovered the foundation of the gatehouse and the remains of the surface of that old Kingsbridge Road, which was composed of compacted stones and sand, which was topped by a bed of larger pebbles and then cobbles. You can actually see both in the image. The road is to the bottom. Now, these two finds were covered back up because with over 40 million visitors, sometimes the best way to preserve history is to keep it out of sight. But it's pretty incredible to know that this is under our feet. Okay, moving right along, next stop is Nutter's Battery. You can see Nutter's Battery in the back, but first, these flowers. They're bluish purple petals. They really stand out against kind of the green and gray. And these are chicory. And here's a close-up. They're related to dandelions. And just like dandelions, you can find them in salads, specifically their leaves. They're also a coffee substitute. And in the United States, we also call endives chicory. So to be more specific, these are Chicorum intybus. And although they're quite common, again, they're related to dandelions, they're also quite delightful. This is Nutter's Battery. It was named for a man named Valentine Nutter, and he was a landowner. And until the 1940s, there actually wasn't a path to this spot. The Parks Department put one in 45. And they also created a kind of a stone foundation to mark the fort. But during that restoration of the fort landscape in 2014, we restored that stone foundation, and then we added new plantings, and we restored the walls and those pathways. And I love how the kind of the stone foundation really frames these jagged rocks that are right there in the middle. But just like Fort Clinton, we come here for the views. You can actually see the mere that's peeking out through a break in the trees. And prior to that restoration, the view here and the views all around the fort landscape would have looked quite different, because as part of that really massive project, we had to remove a lot of the modern amenities, which is asphalt and fences and things. And then we added features that receded back into the landscape. Going to our next stop, we're gonna actually have to cross the East Drive and then head into the North Woods. So you'll see that our next stop is right by that curve. Now, the North Woods is one of Central Park's most wild spaces, and it's full of towering trees and really, really dense shrubbery. And if you saw the weekly walk last week through the North Woods, you know what I'm talking about. Actually, that was 2 weeks ago. The Dean was last week, also great. And it's because the North Woods is so wild that the site of Fort Fish is actually really pleasant, really exciting. You go through this really dense wooded path, and you open up onto a grassy meadow. And this is the site of Fort Fish. There's nothing left of Fort Fish in the area. It doesn't provide also the same views that it did in 1812, or the War of 1812. This is a painting of it, also from the New York Historical Society. Fort Fish is in the middle, and then just to the top right corner of Fort Fish, that would be Fort Clinton, and then over on the left is Nutter's Battery. You can see from this that the forts weren't actually very substantial. They were more fortifications and less forts like we might think of them today. And they didn't have living quarters or any mess halls or anything like that. And historians believe that the buildings, the barracks and things like that, they were located on the Great Hill. And that's because in 1864, during the creation of the park, workers excavating the Great Hill found a stone fireplace. And it's likely remnants of actually the Revolutionary War over there. Okay, moving right along. We're gonna head out of the North Woods, and then we're gonna go down behind Conservatory Garden. We've got our walks planned out till the end of July, but I actually would love to hear from you. What else you're interested in seeing and what else you're interested in exploring together. So I'm gonna put up a poll here, and it would be great if you can vote for your top 2. And if you have any other ideas, you can feel free to pop them in the chat. Let's see, poll. Number 2, launch. I'll give you a little bit of time. And if you don't know what some of these places are, that's also really great because it sounds like that would be something really fun to explore. So, okay. Now, so often, as we're walking through anywhere, we have a destination in mind. And I knew that we wanted to explore the fort landscape, but I didn't really know where I was gonna go. I just meandered and I took a right here and took a left here. And I'm really glad that I did, because had I not, I might have not noticed the bird's nest, which is in the tree on the left side. You can see a little black mass, just about 2/3 up the screen. I don't know what type of bird that is because no one lives there. Or at least no one was home when I was there. But the tree that they're in, it's actually a pretty choice tree. That is a very location. The nest is in a crabapple tree. The Conservatory Garden has some of the park's most beautiful crab apples, but there are actually others scattered throughout the park, and they've got really beautiful spring blooms. And then in the autumn, their fruits turn really bright red, and it almost looks like they are decorated for the holidays. Humans, us, we don't eat crab apples outright, but we do use them in jams and jellies. But as you'd expect from the bird's nest, they are very, very popular foods for birds. Now we have to cross back over to the East Drive. And across the East Drive is a humongous Gingko tree. And this is actually my favorite tree in Central Park. Right now it's a little nondescript, but it is preparing for quite a show. I took this photo last November, right as the leaves were at their peak. I mean, it's incredible. And I think there's something really special about getting to know a tree and then watching it grow and change throughout the year. And if you don't have a tree that you know very well, I would encourage you to go out to your local park, be it Central Park or elsewhere, and just take a few pictures now and take a few pictures in a few months and see how it grows and changes, because it's pretty incredible to be able to look back, 8 months ago and see what it looked like. Crossing the drive. We're walking down on the backside of what's called the Mount. The Mount was another high point in the park, and it's an incredible space. It has an incredible history that includes convents and taverns and statues and houses, and that list goes on, but we don't have time. So we'll explore the Mount in another weekly walk. For now, I wanted to highlight this beautiful kind of nursery. The Central Park Conservancy has a really robust composting operation, and it takes place on the Mount just a little further up the path, and that's where the soil aspect of that really happens. But we also reuse a ton of other natural materials. If a tree falls across a path, we chop that part up, grind it up, and then put it back on the ground somewhere else, just in a different form. We've also got some smaller trees in here that our landscape architects will eventually place throughout the park. And it was quite hot when I was exploring and taking these photos. So I tucked under a tree just across from this area for a little shade. I'm not gonna lie, when I got under here and I looked up, I was a little startled because at first glance, I thought there were larvae that were just like living all over this tree. But that is not the case. It is actually a white mulberry tree. Many of the white mulberries that we have in New York can be traced to one shipment that came in the 1770s. They were imported because there was a gentleman who wanted to start a booming silk trade here in New York, and white mulberries are actually food for silkworms. That wasn't to be. There were not silkworms here in the park, but these are very, very popular with birds. Now, the white mulberry actually has invasive tendencies, and it can hybridize really, really easily with a red mulberry, which is native, and that's not great. But with careful management, and the Central Park Conservancy has an incredible team, even non-native species and species that have invasive tendencies can be really valuable parts of the overall ecosystem. Okay, the next stop will be our last. The last stop gives us a chance to just kind of take in all that the northern area of Central Park has to offer. The northern area is less traveled than the south, and the rocks and the trees and the natural wonders of the north really are a sight to behold. I want to thank you so much for exploring the fort landscape with me and bearing with any technical difficulties. Before we go, I want to share with you the results of the poll. All right. It looks like a lot of people are interested in Belvedere Castle, which is really exciting because that is an incredible spot in the park. And we would love to go to Belvedere Castle and kind of tour the surrounding area. Strawberry Fields was also popular. Hopefully we'll be able to get to all these spots eventually, but this is really helpful. So thank you, and look for one of these in early August. I also want to share a few more ways that you can stay connected to Central Park virtually. On the My Central Park page, you can learn a little bit more about how the park has served as a respite in times of crisis. You can read stories about why the park is important, and you can share your own stories. And you can also download some really fun coloring pages and word scrambles and the really cool Zoom background that I have behind me right now. I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place. I will be there, and we together will stroll around the conservatory waters. I'm going to leave the room open for a few minutes just so we can answer any last questions that still might be lingering. And if you are celebrating the 4th of July this weekend, have a happy holiday. Regardless, from the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe and be well.